Greetings to all and welcome to the Seattle Law of One podcast. Today's episode is a very special one because today we are joined by Austin Bridges, Gary Bean, and Trisha Bean from the L&L Research Channeling team for a panel discussion on their experiences channeling the entity known as Quo. My name is Jonathan Tong, and I am facilitator for the Seattle Law of One study group. We can be found in the list of study groups on the L&L Research page shown on your screen. We do also have a Facebook page, and we do meet on Zoom twice a week, Tuesdays from 3 to 5 p.m. Pacific time, and Saturdays 8 to 10 a.m. Pacific time. You don't have to live in Seattle or anywhere near Seattle to join our Facebook group or join our Zoom sessions. Anyone who's interested and available is welcome to. Just contact us at seattlelawofone@gmail.com to get on our mailing list. We do send out emails once a week to let you know what we're going to be doing that week, as well as the Zoom links. We do also have a YouTube channel where we keep recordings of previous podcast episodes, as well as previous recordings of Q&A sessions with Jim McCarty and Austin, Gary, and Trish, when we can get those guys together at the same time. Go to our YouTube channel and hit the subscribe button to get notifications when we upload new videos. And again, contact us at seattlelawofone@gmail.com if you would like to join any of those Q&A sessions. Otherwise, as mentioned, today's topic is on channeling. Let's go ahead and meet our panelists. Panelists, go ahead, let our viewers know who you are, where you're calling from, and roughly about how many years have you been channeling with L&L Research, starting with Austin.
Hi, my name is Austin Bridges, longtime listener, first-time caller. That's not true. Called in plenty.
Cut. Just kidding. Go ahead.
Calling in from Louisville, Kentucky. I always forget the year that we started channeling, but I think it's been 7 years now, Gary and Trish.
2017, I'm pretty sure.
17. So going on 8 years now that we've been channeling with LL Research.
Nice. Gary?
Yeah, Gary Bean, Louisville, Kentucky. Great to see you, Jonathan, and that you are wearing your white adept hoodie. I know that means time. And
I'm going to have to edit that out. Sorry.
I first learned channeling in 2008 from Carla, but I didn't take the practice up then. We can talk about that later. But otherwise, I've been alongside Trish and Austin for the journey of learning and practicing channeling.
Nice. And Trish?
Hello, everyone. I'm Trisha Bean, also from Louisville, and also since, what do we say, 2017?
17, I'm pretty sure 17. Might have been 16.
I think out of the three of us, though, I'm probably the one who's taken sabbaticals the most from time to time, so not a full 7-8 years.
Medical sabbaticals.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, and I was going to say being events coordinator does not count as a sabbatical. So thank you so much to all three of you for all you do for L&L Research, in addition to the channeling thing. Really looking forward to our conversation today. I did want to say before we proceed, I believe our panelists would want to assure everyone that they do not consider themselves to be experts in the law of one, or better authorities on the law of one than anyone here on Zoom or watching on video. They may know more details about what has been said by the entities known as Quo and or Ra in previous channeling sessions, but they know that nobody is a better authority than you in terms of how you apply any of these spiritual teachings to your daily lives. And I know these folks definitely do not want to be put on pedestals of any kind because they serve as channels. Is there anything you would want to add to that, Gary, before we get going?
No, I think you said it well. Thank you very much for speaking to our hearts.
You bet. For those who are new to the law of one, you can think of the law of one as a set of spiritual teachings based on the understanding that all is one and that one thing is love. Pretty much everything we say and read today could be considered some variation of that one unifying statement. Much of what we're going to be reading through together today came to us through the process of channeling. You can think of channeling as a form of telepathic communication between humans and entities such as angelic beings, extraterrestrial beings, spirits of deceased, higher self, inner planes entities, etc. Basically, a channel serves as a mouthpiece for other entities to speak through. There are two types of channeling that have been done by our friends at L&L Research. Trance channeling is when the channel is in a trance state, subconscious or unconscious, as if asleep, not really aware of what's being said. This is how contact was made with the entity known as Ra in the early 1980s. Conscious channeling is when the channel is in a conscious but deep meditative state, meaning they are somewhat aware of what is being said. This is how contact was made with the entity known as Quo, starting in the mid-80s up until present day. I'm going to stop here and ask our panelists, is there anything I've had in the last couple of slides that you think is not totally accurate or perhaps misrepresented? If so, I'm going to be embarrassed because I've been using these slides for the last 20 episodes or so, but I should probably check on that before we start talking about channeling. Panelists, anything you would suggest rewording or rephrasing in any of these last couple of slides?
No, I think that you got it. I always like to add a caveat that these terms, trance channeling, conscious channeling, are idiosyncratic to Ella Research. They're kind of the two different types that Ella Research has experienced and our labels for them. So other people might call different types of channeling different things. That's just how we label what we've experienced. And
Oh, I
Carla
didn't know that.
Yeah.
I did not know that. Thank you for clarifying. And we are going to talk more in depth about trance channeling and conscious channeling before too long. Gary, Trish, anything to add? Any suggestions? Does it look good to you?
I had a quick production question just because I want to know if I can pick my nose while somebody else is talking. Is Zoom...
Gonna have to edit that. I should warn you, I generally don't edit these videos, so whatever says goes, and you can pick your nose at will, my friend. The camera generally only picks up when you're speaking, so try not to do those two things at the same time.
I'm okay with the world knowing that I picked my nose, and yeah, that's what I wanted to know, if Zoom is just recording the person talking at the time. So okay, cool. Thanks for the comment. Otherwise, no, I thought that the slides are great. Thanks for trying to represent it with such fidelity.
Good. I try to make these episodes all so that they're kind of freestanding and anyone can watch whether they're new to the law of one or not. So I try to put a little bit of background information on. So before we take a look at passages, I would like to start with the question of why channel? Can each of you give us a short 2-minute or less answer to the question of why you chose to serve as channels? We'll obviously discuss more in depth after that. And if you want to add your connection to L&L Research, you are welcome to. Otherwise, Austin, would you mind starting us off? Why did you choose to serve as channel?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think when the prospect for us channeling came up, I was naturally drawn to it because channeling was something I already did in my personal life, and channeling my higher self, that is like a big part of my own spiritual practice. So it is not channeling, like I didn't learn to do that in the same way that we learned how to channel from Jim, but it was something that I already felt like I had some capacity for and I had some feel for. And so understanding that it was a service to others in the context of channeling with LL Research to carry on Carla's attempt to channel as a service to others to bring forth information and help people connect to the Confederation and understand their own spiritual journeys. That's really what called me to it, was feeling an affinity for it, feeling a calling for it, and wanting to carry on in Carla and Don's name and alongside Jim.
Nice. Thank you. I did not know that you were channeling higher self before. That's really interesting to know. And I believe Aram might have a question related to that later on in the podcast. Otherwise, Gary, short answer on why you chose to serve as channel?
Why do you have to qualify it as short when talking to me specifically? Yes. So I did it primarily not out of a desire to channel, really. It was born of a sense of honor duty to LL Research. You know, Carla had passed, and I knew, like, this is LL Research's central service, and I needed to step up to the plate. and had a good deal of anxiety about it. But over time, the desire itself to channel and to channel better grew until it became perceived as this sacred opportunity to connect with a light and a love beyond our illusion, and to try to help get a semblance of that light and love into our world in an impactful way. I mean, I know what this channeling has done for my own journey, and we're here, all of us, probably because we've been similarly impacted, and we received that from readers around the world. So
nice. So beautiful. Yeah, thank you so much for that. Trish?
Yeah, I think I definitely had interest in participating in this service, but I felt very unworthy and kind of like, well, this will be an experiment just to see if I'm even able, but have held no expectations that I would be. So pleasantly surprised whenever I was able to perform the service, and the choice seemed just kind of natural. It just seemed to kind of happen. So not even really much of a choice, but holding a lot of gratitude to be able to have this honor duty to serve in this way. I feel as though I separate myself as Trisha as a separate self from the instrument channel, just because I don't want to ever self-identify as a channel, if that makes sense. The service is separate from myself, although I'm happy to participate in it or provide it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I believe there's a passage we're going to be looking at later that maybe speaks to that a little bit. So, yeah, really appreciate the service. And I can only assume that this was something that all three of you planned pre-incarnatively to do, as opposed to it being a freak accident or something. I thought I might have follow-up questions on that before we get into passages, but I don't think I actually do. I think I just kind of want to start off with that as a opening statement, since I would imagine there's more than a few people maybe on the Zoom call or watching this who have thought about being channels themselves, and that again we will get into later. Is there anything that any of the three of you wanted to add before we take a look at a passage from Carla's channeling handbook?
just a quick add on to Trish's, and she brings up a good point. And I likewise, I don't really identify as a channel. I mean, it is this service and this thing what we do. It's a life commitment, and it's very important, and we take it seriously, but it doesn't come up for me as like part of my identity.
Appreciate it. Yeah, it's a huge responsibility, and it's a huge whole other life thing that I could imagine you would want to have separate from your non-channeling life. That makes perfect sense to me. Anybody else have anything they wanted to add before we take a look at some passages on channeling? Sounds good. So let's take a look at tuning and channeling. First passage we're looking at is from Carla's channeling handbook, and it is on the subject of tuning. She said, "Though I do not teach any particular school of channeling, in working with students, I do try to get across two concepts, each one of which has a passive and an active phase. The first concept is that of tuning. We have talked about the mind as a radio receiver, picking up intelligent, invisible signals and relaying them using our physical equipment. Using this analogy, it should be obvious that tuning is all important. There is intuitive tuning and there is discriminative tuning. First, one must tune the passive, intuitive mind. This is the mind in relation to itself. Meditation is intended as the chief tool for perfecting this process. In meditation, you are relaxing and releasing the self from its conscious boundaries, but you are doing work of active intuition also, generating a receptive, active, particular inventory vibration, turning actively towards the source of the signal which you will receive, and declaring yourself ready to receive fresh insights into your waiting conscious mind. In no way does a receptive attitude connote anxiety or anticipation. You must be meditative, relaxed, and accepting of whatever may come. Too much concern, and one can easily channel a higher percentage of one's own barely unconscious material, delivering not a majority of cosmic thoughts, but a mishmash of your own half-digested perceptions. Without the over-concern, even if you are channeling some aspect of your own being, you will be channeling a much clearer version of this same material. As noted, this, of course, is from Carla Ruckert, who was, of course, one of the original members of the channeling team at L&L Research and the one who channeled the entity known as Ra, I'm sorry. And she did actually write a channeling handbook, which can be found in the L&L Research Library if you go to library. And along with everything else at L&L Research, it is available in print version if you would like to support the organization and buy a hard copy of it. That would be a wonderful and beautiful thing to do. But like all the other spiritual teachings at L&L Research, they offer it for free also, and you could download it as a PDF as if you want. A true testament, I would think, to the value of spiritual teachings here, that they are offered to everyone without money. You don't have to have money to get these spiritual teachings. So anyway, yeah, there is so much in this passage I would love to unpack, but I think maybe for starters, I'm really fascinated by the idea of tuning in like a radio receiver, that each of you are basically trying to tune in to this very narrow band frequency that is known as the entity as quo. And it is remarkable to me that after reading hundreds of different channeling transcripts, even though the three of you are obviously three very different individuals with different personalities, when I read your channelings, it really sounds to me like it's pretty much the same entity of quo speaking, regardless of which of the three of you are channeling, which is really a remarkable thing to me. I was wondering, and obviously tuning is through meditation is a big part of getting that mix of self and channeling that you want. I guess I just wanted to ask you about the tuning process. Yeah. Gary, maybe for starters, can you just comment on anything you see in the passage here that's related to how you tune into quo, and is that radio receiver a good analogy for you?
So we're talking about tuning specifically and not challenging right now.
Right, channeling, we've got another passage on that coming up.
Challenging. Yeah, so, you know, we are a composite of a lot of different energies within us. We have discordant notes, we have disharmonies, we have shortcomings and blockages, and in tuning, one is declaring who oneself is. You know, I think this is what Carla is talking about in terms of this intuitive tuning and the developing of the intuition. It is a declarative statement to tune. One, this is why Carla emphasizes the necessity to know yourself. So you are declaring who you are at your highest, most fine-tuned, most idealized version, and that leads into challenging, of course, what you would die for. And by doing so, it's like you're turning the big radio dials, and then on a more sophisticated machine, you're changing all the dials, the big and the small ones, so you can narrow your frequency so that you can form some kind of congruency with a higher density entity who can meet and match that frequency. And so that you invite only the highest and best that you can carry in a safe and stable manner that's going to be focused on unconditional love. But to keep it short, I'll stop there.
Yeah. Fascinating. Yeah. Trish, anything to add to that, or any separate thoughts, reflections?
Yeah, so I think what Gary was speaking to, I find a lot of resonance with, and in terms of like finding that specific dial on the radio, like for me, it's about this like balance of being open, receptive, discerning, meek yet brave, and like all of those things being different flavors of just loving acceptance and unconditional love and full love of self. Because I think to exercise all of those equally, one must, like you said, really know oneself. So I think that's what comes to mind for me about the dialing in, is that it's this formula wherein everything is bountiful and present, but also is measured if that makes sense. If that everything is
It does. I was wondering, could you talk a little bit more about what you said before about being both meek and brave? I think that's fascinating.
So that's something that's just recently come up for me. I would say probably in the last 2 years of channeling. It's part of my intentional tuning practice, that I ask that of my higher self and myself to be. I wrote it down just to be sure I had it. To make sure that I am meek yet brave, open yet discerning. Uh, and I state those things over and over and over again once I am in my tuned space, just to further hone and, I guess, crystallize the connection before even asking for the connection with Quo or whatever other entities on the other end.
What a beautiful thing to do. And do you channel your higher self as well? Do you contact your higher self, as I believe Austin said he does?
I don't do that as a personal practice on my own. I have worked with various teachers who have helped me do that. Yeah.
Fascinating. Yeah, I don't think we've ever really talked about that before in any of other Q&As. That's super fascinating. Austin, anything to add?
I really like the radio analogy, and just to put it into more specific context in what we're doing during tuning, on the day that we're channeling, our energy could be anywhere. We could be, dealing with all sorts of manner of things in our personal life, and whatever knobs we turn inside may be wildly out of proportion, mildly untuned. And the tuning process, I've found, especially the more that we do it, every time I tune, it's unique each time because I have to sort of pull in my energies from wherever they are. And it's like not just tuning one dial, but there's lots of little dials inside that you kind of adjust based on where you are, and sort of doing your best to become that clear, balanced channel. And so I really like the radio analogy in that sense, that it really is kind of like if you just imagine the aspects of yourself that can have these cycles and energies, just turning the knob to get it to that aligned place where Kuo can come through.
Beautiful. Yeah, I think it is a really interesting way of looking at channeling that kind of allows you to look at other channeled material as well. I mean, I'm sure there's many people on this Zoom call and many people who are watching this who have looked at other channeled material from other sources, whether that might be Quo or Confederation entity or something entirely different. And thinking of all of those as potentially different radio frequencies, different radio stations, I think is an interesting way of looking at how similar or different some of that material might be. And I think we're going to talk about that a little bit later. For now, I think I want to talk a little bit more about the tuning process, because I am fascinated by the tuning songs just because I love music myself. And I'm fascinated by how I believe it has been a longstanding tradition of the channeling team listening to some sort of tuning song before they channel, either by themselves or in public. And I think the thing that's most fascinating to me is how it seems oftentimes your tuning songs are really what could be considered pop songs, songs that people have heard on the radio or Spotify or whatever. I would have assumed that a tuning song would be something more like with a hypnotic sort of melody or rhythm, that something that would kind of allow you to go like into, for lack of a better word, some sort of trance state. But that doesn't really seem to be the case with a lot of songs that have been chosen. Like Led Zeppelin's Stairway to Heaven, for example, I believe was used as a channeling song. And other ones as well that are pop songs. Trish, any thoughts on, like, I don't know, how do tuning songs work for you?
I think you bring up something very interesting that I hadn't considered before, about it being like this, I don't know, like the composition itself musically being an entrance. I think for it, at least in my reflection, it's what is being invoked through the lyrics that's often our focus. So whenever we are listening to songs that they often speak about being a wanderer or channeling love or finding love in, this kind of crazy world, then that allows oneself to meditate upon those concepts and open the heart more deeply. So it's not so much, for me at least, listening to the musical sounds, but listening to the feelings and the emotions behind the lyrics that are helpful for me. And I imagine that that's maybe part of the process of choosing.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah, I guess I just hadn't really thought of it that way. Austin, any thoughts, reflections on that?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I actually have the way that I've thought about it for a long time involves what Trish said, but also sort of a larger view. And I think just to sort of explain what we're talking about here, in case somebody's not familiar with our process, when we come together as a channeling circle, there are various aspects of tuning, whether as a circle or as individual instruments, and how it unfolds during a channeling circle is first we will go around the circle in what's called a round robin, and people kind of share about their lives and their spiritual journeys. And I don't know if Carla specifically ever referred to that as a tuning process, but to me, that's absolutely part of the tuning process of the group is people sharing what's going on in their lives, being vulnerable, and basically putting themselves in the circle and us coming together. That really creates a certain energy in the group. Then the instruments will go off and go through the specific tuning process that Carla has described alone, sort of in a different room, which is in, complex visualizations, states of mind, stuff like that, sort of going through the process of tuning ourselves as instruments. Then we go back out into the circle and listening to a tuning song with the entire circle. And uh, I appreciate what Trish said for sure. Like we always attempt to find inspirational songs that have some sort of spiritual lyrics. But I also consider that, the music, even though it's not sort of hypnotic or inducing a trance, it is vibrational. Everybody's listening to one song. The whole group is, very much paying attention and being mindful of this one thing that is vibrating both literally as music and sort of metaphysically as concepts and emotions and through the lyrics and stuff like that. So with everybody tuning in to the song, that to me feels like we are all tuning to, like we're becoming one through all listening to that song. And that's an important part of tuning too, is the group kind of unifying in that vibration, because I believe that when we channel Kuo, then Kuo is utilizing the entire energy of the group and not just us as instruments to come through.
Fascinating. Yeah, that all makes perfect sense, and I think kind of goes along with what Trish said in terms of just the words creating that vibration that you're seeking that helps you tune, which I guess I hadn't really thought of it that way, but it's beautiful, and the whole process as well of the group round robining. Gary, anything to add?
What can I say? We love Lady Gaga's Telephone, and what was that South Korean group like 15 years ago? Gangnam Style? That really gets us.
I knew that would be a great tuning song. That kind of goes without saying.
Yeah, obviously there's that, like Trisha, there's a certain range we wouldn't want to be putting on, say, Metallica. Unless, I don't know, maybe like Nothing Else Matters could be a source of inspiration, but we are discerning, and this template was set by Carla and was a tradition of Carla and Jim's, and I think they did music back in Don's time. I'm not sure, but I think another reason that we use it as a tuning, in addition to what Trish and Austin have said, is that music impacts us, activates a different aspect of our being, particularly our intuitive sides. It can be structured though it is, it can bypass our rational minds to some degree and help us open our hearts as well. So I think that's an important part of tuning as well. But I appreciate the template that Carla set so many years ago. It works really well.
Yeah, and the opening of the heart part really makes sense. That's what it really seems to come down to for all of us, I think, in our own way. I did have one other question that I wanted to ask on this as a follow-up, and that is probably about the third paragraph where they're really talking about the meditative state and not having anxiety or anticipation. It is fascinating to me that any of you can somehow manage to get into that meditative state. not only by yourself, but I mean, like with other people there, whether it's like 15 people in Jim's room or, like 50 people or more at a gathering. It seems like the public pressure to perform in that way, I have no idea how I would be, well, I wouldn't be able to do that. And I'm really curious about how the three of you managed to get to that state in spite of all the pressures that you might feel for whatever reason. Austin, can you share any thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is probably for me what has constantly been the most difficult part of channeling is the anxiety. Because I think I've shared before with the study group, I have social anxiety. And so in a situation like that, it is intense. Like it's very intense in a situation like that. And so this is a part of channeling that I personally have been on a journey of improvement and am still on a journey and will probably always be on a journey of trying to reach a meditative state that is absent of the anxiety and anticipation that Carl is talking about here. But I do think that the more I do it, the more I can trust in the process. There is a little bit of relief in channeling. It's a different kind of relief because if it's just you performing, there's a lot of pressure on you. If you trust the process and the process works, then you just have to receive and translate. And it is, once you get into that flowing state, a lot of, for me, the anxiety melts away. And once it's happening, I can feel a lot more comfortable with what is happening and hopefully reach something like what Carla is describing here. But like I said, it's going to be a constant thing for me to work on for a long time.
I would think so, and thank you for doing that. Gary?
Yeah, I mean, we don't live slow moving, spacious, relaxed, and contemplative lives for the most part. We live very busy, boisterous lives. There's a lot going on, is what I mean to say. And one needs to bring all that to a halt in order to create this inner spaciousness and tune oneself and show up with full mind and body.
How do you do that?
Part through well, I think part of it is the psychological cues of coming together as a group, like Austin was describing, the round robin, being in Jim's living room, or the handful of times we've done it here, or being at a gathering. All those little steps have started to wear neural grooves in our minds and souls, so to speak. So it walks us through it takes us one step after the next into the tune state, and then the rest I think is just will and faith. It's just setting us really intending to show up and be of highest and best service and commit to that and jump over the edge and do it.
Will and faith, yeah, for sure. And neural pathways, that's an interesting way to look at it, which makes sense. Trish?
I don't know if I have a lot to add. I, like Austin, suffer with pretty intense social anxiety. And that, as mentioned in my first bit, a lot of like self-worth issues. And so it is, as he said, like a constant practice to just become more comfortable, more confident in oneself. So you continue to lay the groundwork with each passing experience to hopefully make a more clear, accessible channel, or even just to make the whole experience more comfortable. But it will be, I'm sure, one of my life lessons to learn to accept that part of my service, as I think probably all of us.
What a amazing, I don't know, Olympian, superhuman challenge. I mean, it would be enough for just a normal person to handle the pressures of that with groups of people. But for three of you, I believe all have social anxiety to some extent. And to be able to somehow overcome that and do what you're doing, just what a beautiful service to others. I gotta say, I really have a feeling the three of you are going to graduate to third density finally. I'm good chance.
I can't wait.
Finally, it's taken long enough.
I've heard great things about third density. I'm very excited.
I meant fourth density. I'm sorry, I effed up the joke. I meant you might finally graduate to fourth density this time. Yeah. Ah, shoot, I'm gonna have to edit that out. Anyway,
It was intentional. It was really good.
Yeah, I thought it was really good.
yeah. No, I meant fourth density. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, no, for sure. But really, I know you guys don't want to be put on pedestals, and nobody here is going to put you on a pedestal. We just really appreciate your willingness to really take those risks and to do such difficult things in spite of the anxieties and all the pressures that you must feel otherwise. So, yeah, you guys get a free pass on whatever it takes in order to be able to continue doing that. Much appreciated. I did want to talk a little bit about challenging. This is from a Quo session dated April 19th, 2009, where Quo said, "We commend your celerity in challenging such entities and would encourage you to challenge all perceived spirits in the name of that principle that you hold the highest and the dearest, that principle for which you live, and that principle for which, if necessary, you would die. That is your metaphysical ground, and when you take your stand upon it, you cannot be moved." Celerity, just for those of you who don't have a thesaurus handy, just means quickness. They're referring to the quickness of the channel to challenge the entity that was identifying itself as Quo. So, yeah, for panelists on this one, I'm wondering if you can share your own perspectives on the importance of channeling, and if you don't mind sharing on what principle you yourself challenge. For Carla and Jim, that is Jesus or was Jesus. I gather it might be a little bit different for the three of you. Gary, would you mind starting? Can you share a little bit about challenging?
Yeah. So it can be a little bit hard to narrow down for me a bit. I mean, yeah, I can use words to label my challenge, what I'm challenging in. I'm questioning myself as I'm talking. Did you want to talk about challenging generally, or what we do specifically for challenging? Sorry.
Both, whatever you feel more called to speak on first. I'm certainly curious what the principle is for the three of you. I recognize that's probably a very difficult thing to talk about, but I think if it's something that you feel comfortable sharing with our viewers, yeah, I imagine everyone would want to hear that, as well as your thoughts on challenging in general.
Well, I'll speak to my own challenging process, and we'll see the length of my response and where you want to go after that. So I mentioned earlier how in channeling, one must know who they are. And this is a key reason why one must know who they are, because in channeling, you're working with invisible things, invisible entities, things that, can't be seen. And all you have is yourself and your vibration and what you stand for. So you must know, as Carla taught us all, what is so important to you, what calls you to your highest, that you would give your life for it. Because if you know what you give your life for, you know what you would live for. And it's this where it's a little bit hard to define for me, because I use the term unconditional or universal love to describe it. But for me, in my challenging process, I'm trying to not philosophize about it. I'm not trying to be intellectual about it. I'm trying to feel it as deeply as I can to make that frequency strong in me, invoke what is me, what is my highest. And for me, it's just the whole package. It's the whole bundle of the positive principles, the good, the true, the beautiful, the universal love. And on the rare occasion I can cry a little when I feel it, then I feel I'm tapping into something it's most potent. And with the national circumstances as they are in our lives, that of late particularly, that challenging becomes all the more poignant for me. I have an example of what love is not. and what I want to serve and the world that I want to see in terms of a positive world. So that's what I'm trying to evoke for me. And
That makes perfect sense. And I'm wondering, does that sort of relate to what was said earlier about establishing those neural pathways so that you don't have to spend a lot of time in your mind trying to figure out the words for the frequency you're kind of trying to tune into? You've just kind of gone through this enough times, you kind of know how to get to that place of unconditional love for challenging?
oh, for sure, it starts to crystallize over time, but I'm still, it's a journey of improvement for me.
Yeah, appreciate you sharing that. Trish?
It really interesting. You used words that I had written down for my own about really coming to a space. So I challenge on the principle of unconditional love, and part of that process is allowing myself to be just completely open and receptive, and also manifesting that love in a way that when I invoke it, it is me, it's outside of me, it's everything all at once. So using the word invocation was really interesting for me. But what unconditional love and how I see that in every existing thing in this illusion, and just resting in that feeling of what unconditional love is, and then invoking the challenge, then stating the challenge, grounding myself in it first, feeling that feeling, then challenging the contact from that space.
And you each challenge 3 times?
Mhm.
I sometimes go upwards of 7.
Just to make sure. Yeah. Good. Are you mindful of your heart chakra, your green ray, in terms of it being the energy center for unconditional love? Is that something you pay attention to in the process?
I know personally it's a part of a visualization practice of the tuning process, is visualizing white light coming out of it and coming into it in this process.
Nice. Austin?
Yeah, I definitely echo everything that Gary and Trish said. One thing that's interesting is a way that it was framed to me that really connected with me, because I had some difficulty understanding how I could challenge, because I didn't have the sort of crystallized spiritual object of, perfect divine love like Carla and Jim did. That Carla especially refined her relationship with Jesus through her entire life. So it was something that she could invoke. And I never had a spiritual practice anywhere close to what Carla had. Never had any spiritual worship or understanding like Carla. So it was difficult for me to build up. So one thing that I understood in terms of the strength and like declaration of the challenge is one of the teachers who taught us framed it as that scene in Lord of the Rings where Gandalf is on the bridge with the Balrog, and it's, the famous scene where he declares with full certainty, "You shall not pass," and slams down his staff. And even in that moment, in the context of Lord of the Rings, he's invoking divine powers in that scene. And so he pointed out, the teacher pointed out, he's declaring that as he's a certainty. It's not him basically challenging the Balrog in the sense that the Balrog they're gonna fight to get past him. He's saying it's not gonna happen. Like, I'm invoking this divine power that you're not gonna pass. It's just how it is. And so that really resonated with me in terms of invoking something that's really sacred and divine, and with will. Like, you really have to have the will involved with the challenge. And so that really connected with me. And eventually I formed, like Gary, like, I apply words to it. It's universal love. But in our process of learning how to channel with our channeling intensives, it was a sort of a long process of meditation and contemplation about what that means to me. What does that mean? And like Gary said, it's feeling, full feeling. What is universal love when those words come up? What's all behind it? And sort of it comes with like lots of images and feelings and everything when I think about it, and it just fills my being. And I think that's the important aspect of the challenging, is if it's something that you're able to relate to in a sense that it fills your entire being, and something that you're so dedicated to and really, really that groove, then I think that's what we're going for.
Well, whatever the three of you are doing is obviously working because you've been doing it for quite a few years now, and I've read a ton of your channelings, and they all seem really consistent. They all seem to be that same frequency that I've come to know and love as Quo. That same love and compassion and wisdom just seems to come through, and I've yet to see anything that throws up red flags. Which I guess brings me to one last question, and I'm sorry, we're already 45 minutes in. I should probably warn our viewers, this might be a long episode. We're really going to try to keep this less than 2 hours, but just fascinating stuff. Hope you will bear with us on this. And if you're watching on video, feel free to put it in your watch later list and feel free to come back to it later. And this is why we always break episodes into chapters so you can skip around to the topics that are of interest to you. In case it was not, in case our viewers didn't know, the importance of challenging is that, as Carla said, it is apparently a very crowded universe, and there are apparently very many entities who would love nothing more than to find a third density entity who they could speak through. And many of these are of positive orientation with positive intentions, and many of these are in negative orientation with negative intentions. And they can easily mimic that same frequency or vibration of, let's say, Quo in that case. Hence the importance of challenging in the name of something that is so deeply felt to you that you would die for it. So I guess the question I have for starting with Trish, I think, is how do you know on any given day that you're not being fooled by some entity masquerading as Quo? How do you know in that moment, Trish?
I take each experience and test my own or reference my own intuition. If in the process of tuning and challenging, something does not feel 100%, be it my energy, be it my receptivity, be it even just the way that the tuning and challenging went, then I don't put myself in a space to potentially connect with something that's not what I intend to connect with. And if everything feels kosher up to that point and we go into actually begin the channeling, I allow myself a lot of grace personally. And I think being in that space of gracefulness and acceptance and practicing a lot of faith, that I've not felt afterwards that I've touched into something that I wasn't supposed to. So I think the discernment part rather is important for me in the lead up to and the actual practice of channeling itself. That being said, who knows, maybe there'll be a time when I do channel that I do have a moment afterwards where I question it, and then I'd have a better answer to give you.
Like I said, whatever you guys have been doing so far as I can tell from an outsider's perspective, has been working. And now that you mention it, yeah, I can think of at least a couple of times I've read in channeling transcripts where one of you said in the process, this instrument feels like they're going to have to disconnect for whatever reason because of questions or concerns like that. So respect the integrity, that's for sure. Austin?
Everything Trish said, I would just add another framing, and that's trusting the process. Carla developed these protocols over decades, and I can't describe in all words, exactly why it works, but she demonstrated that it works, and it's what we learned, and it has become the ritual that we use. And so really, the idea is Kuo, it could be Kuo or something that really is able to mimic Kuo's energy, so we couldn't tell one way or the other. And so we have to trust that what Carla developed is safe, and I think she demonstrated that it was, and I rely on that.
Well said. Gary? Anything to add?
Pretty much ditto. Who knows? Like I'm not an adept on the inner planes or on in the invisible metaphysical realms. I'm could be fooled. I could have a compromised channeling. I'm human, and I have a shadow side, and I'm full of error and so forth. But just like Austin said, I just have to trust that I've done my work. I do my best to live up to the work of channeling, even when I'm not. We talk about separation, not over identifying with channeling. There's still not a separation in the sense that the life we live day in and day out still must equal the work of the channeling. So I try to do that work too. And like Austin said, trust in the processes. And
Nice. Well, that reminds me of how much I appreciate the disclaimer that Quo always makes at the beginning of a channeling session, which is take whatever you hear here and use your own powers of discernment to discern what resonates with truth with you and discard what doesn't. And I would think the same thing applies to channels. It's like anyone who reads anything that you guys channel should approach it with that same discernment and discern for themselves whether they think that is an accurate channeling or something that throws up red flags. Anything else you wanted to add before we move on to a different subject? Sounds good. Let's talk about trance versus conscious channeling. On December 5th, 2023, not that long ago, Quo is recorded as saying, "We find that comparing the state of the mind-body-spirit complex during the act of trance channeling to the state of the mind-body-spirit complex during the act of conscious channeling may have some informative benefit. But such a comparison can only be taken so far, for the ways in which these processes work can change significantly or very significantly. And so we would not necessarily say that it should be the goal of the instrument in conscious channeling to attempt to recreate the state of the mind or the state of the instrument in trance channeling. However, in order to decrease the instrument's hesitations or assessments or judgments of that which comes through it, and to allow for a more open flow of information, we can suggest that, again, the practice of engaging in creative endeavors outside of the act of channeling, where there is not so much pressure, you might say, to perform or engage in this process in such a specific way, but rather one is allowed to simply express that which is coming through it without judgment and without the pressure of it being analyzed and perceived by others in such a particular and meaningful way, can help to engage those muscles, you might say, that allow for the instrument to become more open to new information and to become clear in this act of channeling in the conscious sense, where you are still somewhat conscious and engaged in this process of receiving the information, but you are able to step out of the way in ways that uniquely hinder this process as well. I found the first part of this passage fascinating because I would have assumed that it was the goal of the conscious channel to try to recreate the state of mind and trance channeling, and they're saying that is not necessarily the case. But they are suggesting ways that you might open up new pathways of the mind, so to speak, to be receptive to information about stuff that we never would have thought of otherwise. So, yeah, I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on any part of that, I suppose. Starting with Austin.
Yeah, the first part I also think is interesting, and just my opinion about why they might say that it's not necessarily the goal to recreate that is because the mechanics of those two types of channeling, at least metaphysically or, on the other side, are very different. Whereas Carla was, in our understanding, her mind body spirit complex removed from the instrument, the body, and Ra then used that directly, manipulating the vocal cords to speak words. And I think that it's probably even dangerous, you might say, to attempt to go into a trance like that and allow an entity to have direct control like that, because as anybody familiar with the Law of One knows, that it was a dangerous thing for Carla to do. And one of the ways that the greeting from their negative friend would take place is them trying to trick her in that sense, and her leaving the body was a very crucial moment in every channeling that happened. So I think that's one reason why they say that, and it's just a very different kind of process, I think. I guess I'll leave it at that for now.
Yeah, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Gary, anything to add to that?
Yeah, that excerpt that you got, that was from a CC circle, and it's been 13 months now, or 14. I haven't gone back to reread it, but I remember the questions being along the lines of framing trance channeling as like the holy grail of channeling, because the instrument ideally wants to be as removed from the equation as possible. And that is not possible in conscious channeling, but that is precisely what happens in trance channeling. And thus, I mean, the product of that, aka the raw contact, is was a quantum leap forward in the profundity and precision of the nature of the material. So with trance channeling being like this goal, so to speak, the questions we're exploring, like how to move closer to that pole of channeling. But
Although
yeah,
they're saying that's not necessarily the goal for the
right.
conscious channel.
Yeah, yeah.
Would you agree that with Austin's reasons where they might have been coming from and putting it that way, just because they are such two totally radically different processes, you wouldn't want to try to get yourself into a trance state like Carla did?
Oh yeah, the danger can't be understated. I gave that whole presentation in 2024 at the gatherings about specifically the danger, that the risk that Carla took, that essentially amounted to losing her soul, because she could have been, quote unquote, tricked or stolen away to negative time space. Not only her incarnation ended in third density, but she would have to undergo who knows how many thousands of lifetimes, her soul, and polarize positively in order to continue forward on her evolution. So it's like, yeah.
Can I cut in for a second? Because I know what you're talking about. Many of the people on the Zoom call know what you're talking about. A lot of people, maybe who are watching this, don't really know what you're talking about. The name of the presentation that you made, I believe, something about crib and narrow beam. Could you, for our viewers who haven't seen that yet, I know Trish has it pinned to the top of the LNL Research Facebook page, so that would be one way to find it. Are there other ways that our viewers could find that presentation? Highly recommend it.
If you go to LL Research's YouTube page, and type in raw contact narrow band beam, and it will come up.
That's good. Thank you. Trish, anything to add?
Not that I can think of, only that this particular channeling was very insightful, because as Gary said, like we were putting trance channeling up on this pedestal, and while the results of trance channeling through Carla were, world changing for a lot of us, that there is just as important and potent information that one can channel consciously, and not even just the way that we channel, the way that each and every one of us channel. We all channel all the time. We just, fix different labels to it. So I was really appreciative of that delineation, to let us know that, there is no like pedestal, there's no apex. It's all of it's important. It's what we do with it.
For sure. Yeah, and as much as we all obviously gain from the raw channelings, I have to admit, I think, given a choice between the two, I think I relate more, vibe more with the Quo channelings. It's definitely two very different kinds of communications, but I feel like Quo is maybe more down on my level than raw is, coming from sixth density. So yeah, definitely appreciate the conscious channeling process involved in that. If you don't mind, I think I wanted to follow up on what they were talking about in the second paragraph, where they were talking about engaging in creative endeavors outside of the act of channeling in order to let go of some of those hesitations and the pressure of performing and allow more open flow of information. Have any of you tried anything like that? You have any thoughts or experiences to share in that regard? Gary?
I think that that recommendation comes from what is our understanding that, or maybe just mine, I'm not sure, that the transmission is interfacing with our conscious minds through essentially our imagination. So the more that we cultivate and develop that imagination and give it space to roam freely and outside of the strictures of rational bounds or programmatic thought, you know, we are all we're programmed in our own ways by society, by our own choices and so forth, and those programs recur in repetitive cycles, and imagination allows us to open the doors more to let information in. And specifically to your question, have I engaged in much creative endeavor? No.
Haven't picked up the saxophone recently?
We did watch some YouTube videos, and we were practicing drawing for a little bit there. But yeah, the life is so full. It's on my, I would like to. Writing is probably the most creative thing that I do. But
Well, you did some Buddhist silent retreats at least a couple of times, which I'm guessing might have helped open up new passageways, helped kind of along those lines.
Oh yeah. Silent meditation retreats absolutely contribute to being a better instrument. I just wasn't categorically slotting that in with this encouragement for creative endeavor.
Right. No, I wouldn't put that in the same category either. But I mean, in terms of allowing the mind to do what it looks like Ra is suggesting in that second paragraph, I would think that would work pretty well.
Quo is
Trish, anything? Any of your own experiences to share?
I just I personally try to keep some type of creative practice in my life, although I probably haven't been too faithful to that practice in the recent months. But I think helping to foster a sense of play and allowing oneself to not take oneself too seriously is probably pretty helpful on this point of opening oneself up to being not fully identified with what we see as ourselves. But I'm always interested to find new ways to engage in that, to find new avenues for exploring that. Yeah, sorry if that's not a very helpful answer.
It's a great answer. Austin?
The way that I've interpreted this passage is primarily, I guess, what you might call Quo encouraging us to enter the flow state, what like artists or even like athletes, people like that, they might call when they get into the groove of something and then it seems like they're not actively doing it. It's something that's moving through them. I think that's what Quo is talking about here. My main outlet for that personally is I've played music since I was a kid and was really into playing music through like my teenage years and early 20s. And I still keep it as a hobby. I'm not as serious about it, but just getting into the groove, putting on a backing track is what I do. A backing track, and then I just improvise over the backing track and lose myself in the music. I think that's kind of what Kuo was referring to here is letting something flow through you in a setting where you're not worried about it being judged and you aren't judging it and you're just letting it happen and practicing letting it happen is really what I think they're talking about.
Indeed. Yeah, that whole session is fascinating. I highly recommend it to anyone who is watching. Go to December 5th, 2023. That was from the CC Channeling Circle. CC standing for what?
Our respective neighborhoods where Austin lives and where we live, because that was the original design of the CC.
What are the names of the neighborhoods?
They are Charlie and Chaplin.
Oh,
I don't want to say that. They're in Louisville, but speaking of creativity, like we didn't feel we had a lot of latitude to come up with a creative name, because if you look at the precedent of how channeling circles are named, they're like, it might be a special meditation group, or we did intermediate group, and so forth. There's not a lot of creativity in the archives. We're like, we gotta have to do something kind of anodyne. So we were like, CC, it works.
Nice. Well, and you are venturing out on channeling without Jim, which I think anybody would see as probably a wise thing for the three of you to learn to do and practice. Yeah, it was a fascinating session where there were a lot of questions asked about the process of channeling. It was very meta, and it was a great dialogue. I just read it. I went back and read it a few hours today because I knew there was a lot of good stuff there, and I was kind of wanting to refresh my memory on it. So it was a great dialogue. It was a time where it's like Quo would say something, somebody would ask a follow-up question, Quo would say something, there were more follow-up questions. So it was really kind of a nice dialogue with Quo. And I remember one part where they said specifically, it's probably harder for you guys to be creative and spontaneous now, specifically because you're building on the legacy that was built before you by Carla, Jim, and Dawn, whereas they didn't have to deal with that. They were creating something from scratch. They didn't have to worry about trying to honor some legacy that they were carrying on. So yeah, I can see how that would be a very different situation. So again, just appreciate all you do to honor that legacy while at the same time being willing to try to forge ahead as you feel called to do. So thank you for that. Did anybody have anything else they wanted to say before we take a look at another passage on another subject?
I'm good.
This is something that I believe has already been alluded to, but there was a great passage on the question of, can anyone channel? This was from December 20th, 1987, and it has been edited for brevity. And Quo said, there is no one who is not a channel. There is no life which is not primarily a channeled existence. By this, we mean that each of you carries within the self deep and unconscious forces, neither to the good nor to the evil, as much as to the deepening of experience. The more times in which the student may recognize the depth of the present moment, just so shall the soul channel more and more in a biased fashion, in an engaged fashion, in an enabling fashion for service to all and for love of the infinite creator. It is our desire not just to make more vocal channels, but to make each aware of the channeling he or she is already doing. Realize what kind of channel that you are, and be that wonderful, loving, compassionate self that this particular type of channeling may bring. A weaver channels the beauty of the cloth. One who works with people channels a love and acceptance, a true listening ear for the entities around it. There are so many examples of the channeling which all may do: the cooking, the washing, the smiling at the sun, the enjoyment of water, all the excitement of daily life, all the little things which are like flowers in a bowl and unexpected corners of your daily life. You channel your daily life. We ask you to do it lovingly and honorably, honoring yourself and honoring that which this instrument would call the Christ consciousness in each and every face that you see. Like so many, like every channeling session that I read from you guys, these channelings are so filled with love and so filled with compassion. And none of the fear-mongering that you kind of see often from other places. I love how they're saying that everyone's a channel already, and you don't have to do what the three of you are doing or what Jim and Carla have done to be a channel. Everyone is a channel of the one infinite creator already. It's just a matter of how purely or how distorted you might be channeling that original thought of love. But everyone is doing it all the time. What a beautiful passage. Any thoughts, reflections on anything there, Trish?
Firstly, thank you for finding this most amazing excerpt. It's so touching, and is a great source of inspiration and comfort to know that there's, by your very being, you are channeling, that you are sourced and created by love. You inherently are a channeling of love. And I think, yeah, I personally am trying to make a practice of holding that thought in my mind more, that every action can be a channeling of love. As she says, or not as she says, as Carla channeled Quo, the washing of the dishes, the cooking, the smiling at the sun, like every moment is so beautiful and intentional rather, and perfect. Even the moments that are painful, that are scary, that they are all so divine. And it is through our hearts and through the way that we choose to show up that we can better manifest the love that is our creation. I think that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, so beautiful. It reminds me what I think Quo has said, referred to many times as a democracy of spirit, meaning everyone on the Zoom call, everyone who's watching this on video has equal influence in the metaphysical world, as much as the President of the United States, as much as Jim McCarty, as much as the three of you. Everyone has the same amount of power to be a beacon of light in the world. And what a beautiful, inspiring thing. Austin, anything to add?
I love this passage. Like Trish said, thank you for sharing it. I think the biggest thing that's coming to mind for me is that this puts the radio analogy into a new context, a bigger context where, we can talk about us being instruments in terms of channeling something in a different entity, but if you think we're always radios and something is always coming through us and we can always tune to a certain frequency that we want to tune to and become conscious co-creators of our existence, because like Huo says, our life is primarily a channeled existence and we have a say in how we tune and what we channel into existence. And I think that's just a beautiful idea that really resonates with me.
For sure. Yeah, appreciate your adding that. Gary, anything to add?
Yeah, I really appreciated Trisha's thoughts. Very beautiful. Thank you. And I would add, in terms of formal vocal channeling, what we do of outer planes entities, Confederation sources, LL Research doesn't have, we at LL don't have a patent on that or an exclusive right to channel Confederation sources, nor are we, going around saying that, we're the best or, we're the sole source, etc. That is available for entities all around the world. And in terms of the broader daily channeling, one maybe newish piece I would add to what Austin and Trish have already said is that a study of the nature of the mind complex, specifically the conscious mind, will reveal or shed some light on this channeling process, because the conscious mind is what we experience in our waking life, but it's and what we take as ourselves in our waking life, but it sits atop an ocean underneath of the subconscious that is connected to the universe and connected to the creator. And that subconscious trickles up through our intuition and through moments of magic. And the more, like Trish was describing, that we align ourselves in harmony with our lives, the more we open that door wider so that love comes up through, because love is not the product of the conscious mind per se, it's the product of the conscious mind surrendering and learning to open. And the archetypes would also give some insight into this channeling process as well, particularly between the matrix and the potentiator. But
that is a whole nother subject for a podcast for sure. Yeah, I love the archetypical mind. Yeah, I think what you said, I think sort of echoes what I think I heard Austin saying, that, a lot of it is like radio frequencies, and there's a lot of other people who are channeling a lot of other entities who may seem like a similar frequency or a different frequency. And again, it's up for each to discern, I think, on their own what resonates with truth and beauty to them. And I would like to note that I think as humanity continues to evolve into fourth density, as more and more indigo children are born with bodies wired for fourth density light, with that more density of light, more truth, more information, we can probably, I believe Ross said, we can expect to see increases of what we now regard as paranormal behavior. And you can see this in the popularity of the telepathy tapes and the apparent increase of telepathic powers among, in this case, autistic children. But I would imagine in the years to come, probably see more channeling happening, channeling of extraterrestrial or angelic or inner planes entities or whatever. And although I imagine it can seem like a very glamorous thing, for lack of a better word for many, I like how Quo here is reassuring us that everyone channels in their own way, and this is only one. Which leads us, I believe, to a couple good passages on precautions. In the channeling handbook, Carla said, never work on channeling by yourself. And I believe that was her who put that all in caps. Try to make your mistakes in the company of fellow meditators, at least one of which is an experienced channel who feels responsible to you. It's a crowded universe, and the new channel may well not have tuning or the challenging of spirits well learned. You do not really want to tangle with a difficult contact by yourself at first. Things can happen and have happened in the past, which caused the hapless channel considerable grief. Any thoughts, reflections on anything there, Austin?
Yeah. Carla did not necessarily encourage people to channel. It wasn't something that, she thought everybody should just go out and try. If you read a channeling handbook and how she's talked about channeling, it's a serious thing that comes with some serious dangers and consequences in her view. And that played out. She witnessed situations of people channeling irresponsibly, and lots of different things can happen in that situation. It's not necessarily always as dire as the risk that she went through with the raw contact. It's typically more distortions of personality, in my opinion, that can pop up in those sorts of situations. So I think that she had several things that if you were going to channel, she emphasized highly, and channeling with at least two other people present and learning from an experienced channel were two of those things that she highly recommended to anybody interested in learning how to channel. And it's just, I think, wisdom from somebody who has extreme experience in channeling and is one of the most tuned channels of our time. I think it's very wise words.
Makes sense to me. Gary, anything to add?
Not about channeling solo and the precaution there. Well, I can add a quick factoid to the mix, and that's that Carla's understanding, and thus it is our understanding, was that in order to obtain a universal contact with outer planes entities, such as the Confederation are, a minimum of 3 was needed. But otherwise, no.
There is something about the number 3. I believe Mr. Tesla said 3s and 6s and 9s. There is something good about that. Trish, anything to add?
I don't think so.
That's good. Yeah, I would think, especially if one is trying to channel positive service to others oriented entities, it would be really important that that person knows why they are channeling, whether it's for others or it's for their own ego, which I think leads into another good passage. This is going to be relating to energy centers. And for those of our viewers who are not up on this stuff, chakras, as they are referred to in the Hindu tradition, are very similar to what our friends in the Confederation refer to as energy centers. So it is believed or understood that prana or chi or ki or life force or the force from Star Wars or intelligent energy, as they refer to it in channeling transcripts, that energy flows from our sun, from our logos, up through the earth, enters our body through the red ray or root chakra, which is involved with survival, sexual reproduction, fundamental vitality. Goes from there into the orange ray or sacral chakra, which deals with personal identity, relationships of ourself to other individual selves. Goes then into the yellow ray or solar plexus chakra, which deals with our identity in groups, our relationships with groups of other selves, be it family, friends, co-workers, members of social groups, political parties, whatever. From there, it goes to the green ray or heart chakra, which deals with universal, unconditional love, as we said. Also the springboard to higher chakras and intelligent infinity. From there, it goes to blue ray, throat chakra, involved with wisdom, light, honesty, clarity, and inspiration, communication to others, our entirety of beingness. Goes from there to the indigo ray or third ray chakra, which is referred to as the gateway to intelligent infinity, the center of the adept, magical workings, and what they refer to as work in consciousness. And then out of the energy body through the violet ray or crown chakra, which also can be thought of as our vibratory essence, our sum or energetic signature of self, reflects overall balance. Most of the text in this graphic, I believe, came from the concept guide, I believe, written by our friend Gary Bean, in case some of this wording looks familiar to you. I believe I was stealing this from you. Thank you very much. Otherwise, here, this was actually from the channeling handbook, again, from Carla. Carla said, as always, the key seems to me to be balance. One puts one foot at the first place, gets a good balance, and then moves on. By jumping from lessons still not learned in the first three centers, or chakras, to opening the fourth center with the first three still unbalanced, the way is opened for any problems that you do have of a personal nature to be greatly distorted and intensified simply because you are a channel involved in offering inspiration and light to others, and so attracting the attention of the principle, which is antithetical to light, the principle of darkness. As a channel, you're transmitting on one level, yet as an individual, you vibrate at a lower level. This is inevitable, yet the distance between the two levels needs to be as little as possible. For metaphysically speaking, you are responsible for living at the highest level of which you've been made aware. If you are a new channel and begin thinking that you have outgrown your mate, that you must have someone who believes in you, that you have your rights and so forth, you may be heading down dangerous streets. Yeah, much to look at, much to unpack in there. I think I like in particular the part about making sure that you've kind of dealt with issues in your red, orange, yellow ray before trying to channel through your green ray and so on. And maybe speaks a little bit to that separation of individual self and channeling identity that we spoke about earlier. Gary, did you have any thoughts, reflections on anything from this passage to start with?
Yeah, like this is, I agree with this naturally, as Carla is ultimately our teacher. And it made me think, like, you know, there's no human instrument who's going to perfect themselves completely before they channel. To just, you know, clear out all the chakras completely, be without issue, live in perfect balance, exist, abide in a state of love and peace at all times. So there is a balance between being an imperfect vessel for something higher than ourselves, and on the flip side, being very, very careful about the temptations that come when channeling light and power and love. And those are, like, in these very specific marital or mated examples that Carla was describing. Carla was a real stickler for marital vows. Like, if you made it, till death do you part, you damn well better stick to it, save in some extenuating circumstances. But anyway, point being, these specific examples she's describing seem to be cases of self-importance, which is one of the, I would imagine, key pitfalls of channeling, is that the person develops an inflated sense of who they are and what their importance is, and then it can manifest in cases like this. So yes, it's
Sure.
that sort of where you got to look at yourself hard and honestly and face yourself, because you are going to make mistakes. It's just that if the mistake goes unacknowledged, and even if it's like justified further, or if mistreatment of somebody is justified further, then this is an opportunity for the negative greeting, which you are, by virtue of your channeling, necessarily attracting to yourself, who is happy to exploit opportunity. But I'll put a period there.
Yeah, no, I appreciate your starting off. There are so many different things to unpack here. And as you suggested, when one is standing as close to the light as the three of you are, and Jim and everyone else does that, the tiniest little shadow in your blockage in those energy centers can really get accentuated and open up pathways for negative entities to enter who would love to mess with your light, take your light, or extinguish your light. Trish, do you have any thoughts, reflections, anything to add?
Yeah, I imagine we're on a similar track of thought. Is like what I got from this is all about humility and remaining humble. And in that, it seems like a lot of the lessons one learns on their way towards learning unconditional love and wisdom involves a lot of humility, involves recognizing when one's at fault, or recognizing where forgiveness is needed for self, for outside of self. And those feel like much lower level chakra blockages. So for one to open oneself up to the higher chakras and allow energy to move through that, one must also be very humble and grateful, and recognizing that we are, as Carla would say, still bozos on the bus.
Yeah.
Can I highlight
What?
that part and
Yeah,
recognize
go ahead.
what one did wrong? Just sorry.
I think someone's highlighting the have your rights, the outgrow your
I have my rights. Damn it.
Sometimes, as the wise one said, you have to fight for your right to party, I believe. Austin, anything to add? Love the Beastie Boys. Sorry, that was a call out to the Beastie Boys. Austin, anything to add?
Yeah, just a quick additional angle in one of the ways that I look at this is that these unresolved issues in our lower energy centers, I think one way to understand them is through Carl Jung's idea of the shadow self, the internal shadow. And even in just everyday life, if we're talking about channeling everyday life, if these things are unresolved, we project our shadow outwards, right? It sort of informs our reality. And so even without the vocal channeling, we are projecting our issues outwards like that. Channeling is, in my understanding, very much a magical act and a very powerful use of the will. And Ra talks about, refining the will, and there could be dangers in the unconscious use of the will, how your unconscious might wield that empowered will, possibly through something like channeling. And if your unconscious is has these issues still in a powerful shadow self, they might, be projected outwards either through the channeling itself or in how you begin to see yourself and your own identity and how you see the world. These things get amplified, like you were saying.
For sure. So many ego traps, I'm sure. I think we are in kind of the winding down phase. I think this was actually the last passage that I wanted to read through together. Do any of the three of you have anything you wanted to add before we move on?
Not for me.
On this topic specifically?
Yeah, on this topic, on this passage.
Nah, I'm good. Thank you.
That's good. Let's talk about non-LL research channelings. As I'm sure you are aware, there are more than a few other individuals or groups who claim to be channeling Quo or claim to be channeling other Confederation entities. For those of our viewers who are already getting information and inspiration from other such sources or are interested in looking, can you share any thoughts, reflections on this subject? I think I'll just put it out to the group. Anyone care to speak to this?
Gary, you're typically really good at framing this.
Thanks. Yeah, I guess our position is the same as been repeated ad infinitum, as disclaimer to the channelings, as disclaimer to how LL Research approaches its mission generally. And that's to encourage one to exercise their own discernment and resonance, to question the source of information, whether that's coming from LL Research channels or another person, another group, whoever that may be. Question that, test it, evaluate it, find out how it does it work for one. Is it internally consistent? Whatever one's metrics for their epistemological evaluation of the world, to engage those metrics and to trust in their sense of resonance. And if one is finding themselves lit up and inspired and feeling guided and informed by somebody else channeling Quo, Hatan, Latwi, Oxel, whoever the case may be, then follow that until it doesn't work anymore. And same with LL Research. Somebody may be lit up by LL Research for a decade and then suddenly start realizing it's not cutting it for me anymore. Or these people are the devil and I must do this. That happens once in a while too.
Nice. Yeah, I appreciate the humility in that, and I hope that we all recognize that every soul is unique, every spiritual journey is unique, and what works for one doesn't necessarily work for anyone or everyone else, and vice versa. Trish, Austin, did you have anything to add to what Gary said?
Just to emphasize something that I think Gary even said earlier, there's nothing about LL Research that makes anything about this exclusive to us as humans or the organization. These are sources that are attempting to speak to Earth through channels, and we are just one of those channels.
Nice. Well, appreciate your sharing that. I believe we do actually have time for a few questions. There were a couple folks who sent in some questions in advance that I think this might be a good time to do. I know Aram is on the call, and I know she had a question that I think you spoke to a little bit previously. Aram, would you like to go ahead and unmute your mic and ask your question?
Yeah, hi guys. Thank you for being here. Appreciate you all sharing so openly. Okay, so I'll just read the question. Can you feel an obvious difference between contacting your higher self versus channeling Quo? Is it subtle and requiring your discernment? Can you describe what the difference feels like?
Nice. Austin, would you mind starting with that one, since I know you mentioned channeling higher self before?
Yes, it's a little bit of a difficult question to answer actually, because when I'm channeling my higher self, well, let me put a pause in this and go back to something we talked about very briefly. Carla talked about needing 3 people to channel outer sources, what she called outer sources, and I don't fully understand the metaphysical dynamics of why, but she did believe that you could channel things like your higher self alone safely. And so that is what I do. I am alone when I channel my higher self, and it is a different process than when we are vocally channeling the Confederation as a channeling circle. And so the situation is different. The whole energetic dynamic is different. So that alone constitutes a very different feeling during contact. But I would say generally, Yeah, when I'm channeling my higher self, there are lots of different things that happen that doesn't happen when I'm channeling Quo. It's a much more personal experience. The imagery is very different. The way the imagery is used, the way that things are channeled and presented to me, the way that things are framed, it's made for me. And there's a lot more leeway in what can be presented and what can be explored in this context, both feeling wise, energetic wise. Every bit of the contact is unique. And so that can change time to time. Whereas in the channeling circle, it is still very subtle, but that is pretty consistent, and it is, more universal, and it feels different to me as well. It's hard to explain specifically what feels different besides we talked about Kuo. It sort of feels like a hug to me. My higher self, it can feel very different in different contexts. So I don't know how helpful that was, but yeah, there is a difference to me.
Trish, you have anything to speak to this? I know you said something about working with your higher self in some capacity.
Yeah, my experiences of working with my higher self have been with teachers of some sort. Either they have experience with mediumship. And so for me, the big difference between contacting my higher self and Quo is that I feel a bit more facilitated when I'm meeting with my higher self. However, there is a different sense of familiarity when conversing with my higher self than with Quo. Quo feels very familiar, but it would be like into talking to myself in a mirror when I converse with my higher self. It feels far more integral to me. And therefore, I'm sure, as Austin was stating, the conversation and the information that comes through has a different tone. It feels a bit more conversational for me when I'm working with higher self rather than with a Confederation source, where I feel like I'm much more allowing that information to come through me. I'm the questioner and the instrument at the same time when I'm working with higher self. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Gary, I don't remember if you said you did much work with higher self. Do you have anything to add to the conversation?
Nah, man, my higher self just said, I'm only going to communicate with you through repeating digits and and dreams that don't make sense. All right, that's how it goes.
I have contacted my higher self many times, but it usually involves cannabis. So I don't think that's necessarily what Aram was referring to. Aram, did you have any follow-up questions on that?
No, thanks a lot.
You were also asking about how channeling Quo may feel different from channeling other Confederation entities, which is interesting and different question. And I don't even remember, have the three of you channeled many entities other than Quo? And if so, can you comment on whether they feel different? Gary, I think I saw your head nodding. Care to share anything on that?
Oh, was it? First, I forgot to say, Aram, good to see you. And we channeled Latos maybe when we were very first learning.
And the tweet.
And the tweet. But my experience was so different than that nor did I faithfully record what the feeling was like in my being, that I really don't have a comparison to make.
Nice. I know you said at one time that Latwii was the sexiest of these social memory complexes you have worked with. That is on record. That is in a YouTube video.
That's like something I might say.
Yeah. It got a laugh then, and it still makes me laugh now. Austin, anything to add?
It's like Gary said, it's hard. It was a long time ago. I remember channeling Latos. I felt it so strongly, like a pressure in my heart. But at the same time, that was when we first beginning a channel, so that just could have been nervousness. So who knows? Kuo feels a little more gentler, and I feel a more like more enveloping, not so concentrated right here, but more here, and a little more in my head. But it's all subtle. It's hard to really pinpoint.
If I remember right, it was said somewhere that Latos kind of specializes in working with new channels. Does that sound familiar to you? Does that sound about right, or am I making that up?
I recall that as well. I think that's true. I think there are, in my understanding, the Confederation has social memory complexes that are dedicated to like working with new channels and helping people channel.
Fascinating. Trish, anything to add?
I feel like there was not that the contact was easier or simpler or what was coming through was less potent, but there was like an energetic difference when channeling Latos, because of, I think, Latos's role as being this Sherpa into the channeling experience, if you will. Maybe a little bit more, I don't want to say hand holding because I don't want to give the false sense that like Quo is cold or that Latos is guiding us to what we are trying to channel, but it just yeah, a different flavor that I'm having a hard time pinpointing.
Nice. Thank you.
Mhm.
Renat had a question that I think this might be a good lead into, and I don't think Renat is on the call, but she did email me this question a while ago. And she was asking, what does it feel like to channel? What is your inner experience? You've spoken a lot to that already in the last hour and a half or whatever. Does anyone have anything to add to that? Starting with Gary?
Terror and fear. uh,
I'll bet.
I mean,
That would be me.
Chris spoke to anxiety, and I didn't on this call, but definitely have it. But yeah, I think the term that we've used before is that once it gets underway and you're in the groove and you're over that hump, then for me,
I think she means, what does it feel like when you're in the process of channeling? Like, what does it feel like inside while you're channeling?
Right. Yeah, for the three of us, I think I feel the least distinctly. I'm the most, thick-headed, I say. And for me, like, I don't feel some big, powerful beam from above that's just flooding me with light and a palpable sense of otherness so much. I wish that were the case. I experienced the subtle energies less strongly. What I feel, I can feel like a sense of comfort, a sense of family, a sense of inspiration. And there are times, and I'll wrap up here, I have this unique energetic phenomena where and I think Austin said he experiences it too. I feel as if I'm like elongating inside. It's so weird. It's hard to put into spatial terms because I'm still aware of my physical body, but something starts to happen. I get really, really long. And there are some sessions I don't know what it is. If I'm concentrating so hard, if I'm going so deeply, I don't know. But this happened in Prague last year, where I come out of it and my two eyes don't sync up anymore. Like, no joke. They are,
like a chameleon.
Yeah, I wonder what I look like.
That'd be a great picture. Yeah.
Not like double vision when you say you've had too much drink. Not that I've ever experienced that, but yeah, I guess that's it. I don't know what's happening there.
Interesting. Yeah, I appreciate your mentioning the elongation part, because I do remember you're mentioning that at least once or twice when someone else was asking that question earlier. Trish, anything to add from your own inner experiences, inner feelings?
Yeah, so there's that familiarity aspect you speak of, and for me there's physical / energetic signature to the establishing of the contact and the way that it progresses forward to the actual channeling process that's very distinct, like certain pressure, like in my third eye area, or sometimes a sense in the ears or a sense in the heart that I can't quite put words to, like not a palpitation, not a pressure, but a growing. And then outside of that, like, and if I'm in that space of feeling very connected and very on, then the actual experience of channeling feels very light. It feels very free. It feels blissful. And if I am in my head and obstructing my ability to channel, it can be very challenging. It can feel like I'm like struggling. There are definitely times when channeling where it feels like a struggle to maintain where I need to be to practice that, to keep myself open. And that's when you'll see in the transcripts where we might say, I need to take a brief pause to deepen the contact, or to say that, the instrument is experiencing X, Y, and Z, and therefore we'll release the contact. But when it's on, it's blissful, it's beautiful, it's comforting and familiar and home.
So beautiful. Yeah, I can sort of imagine that. Austin, anything to add?
Just in addition to everything Gary and Trish said, which I relate to in different ways, if you can imagine sensing your energy field, whatever extends beyond your body, whatever this thing is out here, if I'm sensing that and I can feel that, then the point of contact, when it happens, it feels like there's another field that envelops it and is sort of like pushes in a little bit. So it merges, I guess. There's like this merging. That's the best way for me to describe like the sensations, the intuitive sensations that I kind of feel during channeling.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you all for sharing that. We have one more question, and that is from Kathy, who has a question about something I believe Gary mentioned not too long ago. Kathy, would you like to unmute your mic and ask your question?
Hi, guys. So great to see you today, and thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate you guys so much. My question was with regard to alcohol. I remember last year at the North Bend, I overheard Gary say something that he was looking forward, he might have a glass of wine after the session. And I wonder, is that something you guys do regularly? You don't drink? Does it interfere with your channeling?
Great question. Trish, do you want to start first? And then, I'm sorry, I had a rotation order that's going here. So if you don't mind, Trish, why don't you go first, and then Austin, and we'll let Gary finish up.
Yeah, so I think there's definitely a bit of that alcohol consumption can create distraction in the body and in the mind. And so personally, if there is a channeling coming up, then I try to abstain for a certain amount of time to just kind of detox. And that's more for the physical aspect of it, because I try to release the judgment of the emotional aspect, right? The judgment of like, oh, you need to be a spiritual student, and that means don't imbibe, and eat healthy and exercise every day and meditate every day, because then I start to kind of unravel and close myself off from all those that beautiful spiritual element. So yes, there's a fine balance for me of abstaining in the lead up, and then absolutely enjoying a glass afterwards if it's available.
It's a great reward. It's a great treat for yourself, I'm sure. Yeah, and really can't say enough. I mean, what a sacrifice that is for the three of you to do that, given that you're channeling a couple Saturdays every month. I mean, that really is a thing that I would never do. I engage in a generous sprinkling of these small vices every day, and yeah, giving that up would be a big thing for me, for sure. Austin, thoughts on this?
I like to party every night, so I never abstain before chanting.
Are you quoting a song, I believe?
Yeah, I fight for my right to party, Jonathan.
Yeah. No, I thought you were quoting Kiss from the 70s. That was way before your time. Sorry, go ahead.
I think, the answer to this question is probably going to be unique to everybody. I am not particularly as sensitive to alcohol as a lot of people, so I hardly ever drink like the night and leading up to channeling, regardless, just because that's how circumstances work out. Even though it's on Saturday, I don't really drink on Friday nights. But the sort of line that I try to not cross is if, I know my body well enough. I know when I'm partaking, how I'll feel it the next day. And I think I'll feel any physiological effects, even not like a hangover, but like, if sometimes your heart's beating a little bit faster, you don't get very good sleep, stuff like that. If I try not to cross that line at all, if there's going to be any after effects of the alcohol the next day. So it's very, very light for me, if I'm channeling the next day. But it typically, just by life circumstances, I don't typically drink leading up to a channeling.
Nice. If I recall correctly, bourbon is a favorite of yours?
Yes,
Good old
I do love
Kentucky.
bourbon. Yes.
Nice. So great. Yeah. Gary?
Yeah, there won't be a universal answer to this question. I wish we had Ra's thoughts on alcohol and substances generally, because I want the definitive, authoritative answer, of course. But yeah, so each of us are different. Carla was wired differently, and she's the best channel that I am aware of on planet Earth. And Carla enjoyed alcohol, and I don't remember her having a practice of like abstaining in the lead up to a channeling. Whereas knowing my mind and body, I definitely need to abstain because alcohol interferes electrically with or I should say, alcohol interferes with my electrical, energetic body and distorts the needed stability and clarity for channeling. So I always try to hold to a practice at least 72 hours prior to a channeling of detoxing and being clean, more if I can do it. Sometimes I've pushed up to night 3 prior to a channeling to have a drink or something, but no, I think I'm the most sensitive of us 3 in that regard. But just like Trish said, when it is done, then I do enjoy that red wine.
Yeah. Yeah, totally understandable. I certainly use it as a reward system for myself, usually in just getting through a day, in general. And I would think with all the catalysts and stresses that every normal person is facing at this late stage of third density and early fourth density, I don't know how anybody's getting through those days without medicating themselves in some fashion. So for you guys to do what you do in the channeling, man, more power to you. You do whatever it is you need to do to maintain peace of mind and an open heart, and whether it's alcohol or weed or crack or mushrooms or whatever, you got my pass on that. Let the channeling speak for themselves. Anyway, hey, I think it is time for a pop quiz because we are coming up near the end of 2 hours, and you guys have been more than patient at sitting through all of this. So as you all know, pop quizzes are just meant to be kind of a fun way to end our otherwise serious time together on a fun note, and maybe a fun way to look at Law of One lessons in pop culture. So clearly the 3 of you have had many close encounters with the entity known as Quo, but how much do you know about the legendary science fiction film known as Close Encounters of the Third Kind? Have you seen that movie, Austin? Have you seen that?
It's been a long time. I've been wanting to watch it, but I haven't found it streaming anywhere. So it's been a long time, but yeah, I remember.
But you've seen it.
Very well. Yes.
Have you seen it, Gary?
Yeah, we just watched it last year, the year
A
before.
couple months ago.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Nice.
Making his mountain of mashed potatoes.
Yes. Yes. It is considered by pretty much everybody, I think, to be one of the best Hollywood movies ever made about extraterrestrial entities. That was back in 1977, and it did win 9 Oscars, including Best Director, did get Golden Globe Awards for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Screenplay. So let's see. Going to ask you 3 multiple choice questions about this classic science fiction film. See how many you can guess correct. Those on Zoom call, you can put your answers in the chat window if you want. Those of you watching on video, you can say your answers out loud because we can hear you through your screen. As always, the points don't matter. The point is to have fun. If you had fun learning something about this movie that you didn't know before, you won. Panelists, your first question. What was the original title of the movie script? Was it A, Watch the Skies, B, We Are Not Alone, or C, Kingdom Come? Panelists, you can just go ahead and say your answers out loud.
I think
E.
A.
I heard an A, and then what were the other answers?
Each of us had a different one.
I said C, Trish said B, Austin said A.
Oh, nice. Are you guys playing as a group? That's good. Very good. Yeah. The correct answer is indeed A. We Are Not Alone was the tagline for the movie poster, but Watch the Skies was indeed the title of Spielberg's first script, which focused more on UFOs and shady government dealings than the personal stories of the main characters that we kind of saw in later versions of the script. Kingdom Come was named for another version of the script that came later, done by Paul Schrader, the guy who wrote the screenplay for Taxi Driver, interestingly enough. I know Austin has more than a passing interest in the government's role in covering up what is known as the secret space program and the disclosure movement. Austin, you care to share any thoughts on that? I know this would make a great separate podcast episode, but care to share any brief thoughts on this with our viewers?
Sure. One interesting thing about this movie is that Steven Spielberg consulted with the godfather of ufology. His name is Jacques Vallée. Who there's a character in the movie that hopefully this isn't one of your questions. There's a character in the movie based on Jacques Vallée, and a lot of what is in this movie is a very accurate representation of how the government is involved in these kinds of things, how experiencers experience these kinds of phenomenon. Jacques Vallée wasn't a fan of the end where there's a mothership that lands, but everything else is very close to Jacques Vallée's decades of study of ufology up to this point, including being involved with the government research of UFOs himself.
I thought you were going to say the name of that other guy, Hynek?
J. Allen Hynek was an associate of Jacques Vallée's.
Oh, okay.
Oh, and J. Allen
And he was
Hynek
in the
is
movie, I
in
think,
the movie
briefly.
himself. Yes, yeah. J. Allen Hynek was the government's debunker essentially, and after he was done with that job, regretted his role and took a much more serious interest in UFOs, and was he is like an extra at the end scene where the mothership lands in this movie.
Right. He was with Operation Blue Book, is that right?
Yes, yeah. J. Allen Hynek led Operation Blue Book.
Yeah, which I'm guessing more than a few of our viewers are somewhat familiar with. Trish, Gary, did you have anything to add on the subject of governments, UFOs, disclosure, whatever?
Mm-mm.
Sounds good. We will make that topic for another podcast. For now, your second question. Speaking of mashed potatoes, who did director Steven Spielberg first ask to play the part of Roy Neary? Was it A, Dustin Hoffman, B, Al Pacino, C, Jack Nicholson, or D, Richard Dreyfuss? This is a common question we ask on these pop quizzes. It's often fun to see how different the movie would have been had the main character been a different actor. And oftentimes it is the case that somebody else was asked to play that role before the person in the movie. And oftentimes it was the person who played the starring role who they had in mind from the beginning. So that's your challenge. Who did director Steven Spielberg first ask to play the part of Roy Neary? Dustin Hoffman, Al Pacino, Jack Nicholson, or Richard Dreyfuss? What do you think?
I want to say Al Pacino.
I'm pretty sure it wasn't Richard Dreyfuss. I think A, Dustin Hoffman.
I was thinking Dustin Hoffman too.
Nice. The correct answer is none of the above. You guys have played this game enough. You should know that's always an option. Could be all of the above, could be none of the above. Believe it or not, the director first offered the part to Steve McQueen. Do you guys even know who Steve McQueen was?
Yeah.
Vaguely, I remember him from my childhood. It's somebody my parents would have watched probably.
You'll have to Google him up because he was super popular actor in the 70s, and I guess in the early 80s, but that is who he actually wanted originally. But he turned it down because he said he could not cry on cue, something that he saw as essential to the character. So Spielberg, after that, went to Dustin Hoffman, Al Pacino, Jack Nicholson, Gene Hackman, and James Caan. All of those actors turned it down as well before he finally turned to Richard Dreyfuss, with whom he had worked with in Jaws, and gave him the part. Which is amazing, because you think, yeah, that role, that character, really calls for somebody who has to convince himself that he's not going crazy, and convince others that he's not going crazy. Something you could easily picture Dustin Hoffman or Al Pacino or Jack Nicholson doing. That's a really great thought experiment. Seems a lot like a wanderer. That seems like a wanderer, don't you think? For a lot of people who are having their spiritual awakenings, it is kind of similar to what this character had to go through, the trying to convince himself he's not going crazy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That was a rhetorical question. Are you ready for your last question? Your last question is this. Before using local elementary school girls in gray suits and masks to play aliens in the final scene, the production team had tried using which of the following? A crow wearing a mask, B, an octopus in a jar, or C, an orangutan on roller skates?
Let's see that.
It's hungry.
It's a trap. It's a trick question.
It's hard for me to trust you anymore, Jonathan.
I hear that from a lot of people. Yeah.
Just because I think it's funny, I'm gonna go with C.
Nice.
I'll see if I can get 3 out of 3 wrong. I'll go with crow wearing mask.
And now I'll split the difference and do the octopus in a jar.
Well done. Believe it or not, the correct answer is C, an orangutan on roller skates. Spielberg wanted the aliens to be non-human beings that glided instead of walked. And for some reason, probably because he was on coke like everybody else at that time, he actually thought of an orangutan dressed in a specially made suit on roller skates. The production team tried it on a screen test, but not surprisingly, the orangutan would have nothing of it, was not interested, and just took off its skates and immediately went back to its trainer. And they tried it a couple times before deciding that probably wasn't such a great idea. Which does beg the final question for all three of you. The challenge here, of course, was to picture what extraterrestrials look like. So based on your years of experience in channeling Quo, what do you think Quo looks like? Do you get any kind of visual sense at all of the entity known as Quo? Trish, you got any idea if you had to describe it?
No, to me, Quo is just a feeling. It's hard for me to put a visual aspect to it.
Nice. More than a feeling, perhaps?
Perhaps.
Sorry, I'm quoting another song that you probably never heard before. Boston, 1980. Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, random viewer who got that reference also. Gary, do you get any visuals? Like, could you draw a Quo if given a piece of paper and pencil or something?
I couldn't draw a Quo if they were sitting in front of me.
They are, I'm sure. Yeah.
Quo is this nebulous entity at the other end of a telephone line, and not a good visualizer generally, or imagineer generally. So, if gun to the head, I would imagine a being of light, literally a light being, a being made of light with maybe some kind of silhouette humanoid-ish form, or maybe just a ball of light, a sphere, point.
Made up of 3 social memory complexes.
Mm.
Austin?
Yeah, I get no significant visual sort of stimulation from Quo, no indication of what they look like, so it's hard for me to imagine. I imagine, like Gary, it's probably has to do with light.
Yeah, I would think so.
It's the trend in the higher densities.
It's the fashion everybody's going to be wearing eventually. Yeah. Well, thank you for being good sports, and thank you for sitting through a solid 2 hours of podcast, and thank you for our live Zoom audience who we're having for the first time. Thank you for being here. Any last thoughts, goodbyes, takeaway lessons, anything you want to say before we tie a ribbon on this thing and say goodbye? Austin?
It's immense gratitude for you and any listeners, everybody who's sending questions, and just everybody on the path. We love you all for sure.
Feeling is mutual. Gary?
Yeah, Trish and I have scrolled through the people who are here with us, and we see faces we know, some dearly and some new faces, and it's just so awesome to be with you all, having this shared love of the law of one while the world gets increasingly disharmonious. And outside of channeling or not channeling, just that there are other people to share this path with, that you exist on this planet. That is inspiring, is the most inspiring to me. So thank you all, and thank you, Jonathan, for your effort, your energy, your presence, and for rocking it out. We love you dearly.
Love you guys too. Trish, anything want to add?
Thank you so much, Jonathan, for putting all of this together, including, as always, an amazing pop quiz. You're an amazing facilitator.
I didn't
and
extend my
host.
gratitude that far.
Not that we're keeping score or anything, but if we were, yeah.
Yeah, I'm always appreciative of these sessions, and also just for everyone who's here. Thank you for being here and joining us on this walk of spiritual seeking. Yeah.
Indeed. For the record, I'm seeing 19 people on the Zoom call, so thank you for everyone who was joining us today. And again, Austin, Gary, Trish, thank you for all you've done, continue to do in service to others. To all our friends at L&L Research, thank you for all you've done and continue to do in service to others. For everyone joining us on this Zoom call and giving up time out of your busy day to hang out, thank you for all you've done and continue to do in service to others. For everyone who's watching this on video sometime in the near or distant future, thank you for all you've done and continue to do in service to others. We are sending you our love light, and we are receiving yours. Until next time, and the love and light of the one infinite creator. Adonai. Namaste.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys. Love you all. Thank you.